Hi everyone, I'm Warren. Welcome back to the Intro to SQL course. Right, what we're going to look at in this video is grouping. So I'm just going to open a new query window there, and let's look at our sales transaction data. Select star from sales action. Okay. So if I execute that, this is our sales transaction data. Now, if we wanted to count how many sales records each employee has had, we would need to be able to group the data by the employee ID column. Because you can see employee 1 has sold something here, and he sold something here, and again, and employee 2 has sold multiple times, and they've all sold multiple products on multiple days. So if we wanted to have a count by employee, we would need to count the number of transactions for employee 1 and then count all the transactions for employee 2. So in other words, have a list of our employees showing once and then the total transactions next to it. Now, how do we do that? In order to do that, we need to group the data by the employee ID. So let's have a look here. So we know that we can do count. We can use our shortcut to count the number of transactions, right? So if we run that, we know there are 30 transactions. And now we might say, well, we want to add the column for employee ID. And hopefully that's going to show us employee ID and count. And we execute that. And here we get an error. It says it's invalid because it is not contained in either an aggregate function or group by clause. So what it's saying is, in order to give a count by this, we need to group our data by whatever we want to look at. And it's saying here, we are not using the group by clause. So if we're not using any fields in front of a count or sum or anything like we've done before, it'll give us a total because this is a grand total. If we want to show a count or a sum or an average, any aggregation by one of the columns, we need to have group by. So let's see what that looks like. So normally we would have select. We would have our columns on different lines. We'd have our from table, and then we would add our group by. So it said to us we need a group by. What are we grouping by? We need to group, we want to see a list of employees and a count of transactions by employee. So we want to group. You can't group by account because the count is an aggregation. So everything that is not the actual aggregation itself would need to be added here. So we want to group by employee. So let's run that now. So now you can see we've got employee 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and each one of them has had 6 transactions. And again, the count has got no column name. Just like we've done before, we can add an alias as total count of transactions, or whatever you want to call it. And there we have our heading. So the golden rule is every time you are aggregating anything, all the columns you've referred to in your statement, in your select, have got to be in the group by. So that's the golden rule. All the columns that show here that are not aggregations have got to show under your group by. Okay. So let's go and see if we can find something else here. So I'll just copy one here just to not have these videos running too long. We've gone through the gist of it. Here we want to look at product ID. We want to count the total transactions by product ID. So to group this one, we want to see the product and the number of transactions. Now my test data has always got the same record here, unfortunately, but there you can see a list of products. We're choosing product ID, and we're saying count the number of records as total transactions from the sales transaction table. But because we have a field here, if we run just that without the group by, we get that error saying there's an aggregate function and there's no group by clause. So we need to add group by, and all the fields we refer to that are not aggregations have got to be at the bottom here too. So if we run that, it's happy. So let's go and have a look at something a little bit different. Let's go and grab another query I've prepared. Now we want to look at, by employee, what was the total sales value? So we need to, now we're getting a little bit cleverer. We're doing a calculation here. We're doing a sum of quantity times unit price. So we're taking the quantity times the unit price, we're summing it up, we're aggregating it, and that's going to be the total sales value. So again, we could take this out and we could run just that, and it would give us a total. But the minute we want to show a total by a field or by one of the dimensions, employee ID, we need to, whatever the column is added here, we need to add it in a group by clause. And if we run that, there's the employee and there's the amount that the employee has sold. So now, what if we want to get fancy and we want to sort from highest to lowest to know who our best performing employee is? We can add an order by. Order by. And the nice thing is, let's try and see if we can just take our alias here and use it. Let's make that descending. SQL is clever enough to know that we have renamed this calculation as this, so we can use that in our order by clause, saying please give us a descending sales value. So employee 5 has sold the most and employee 1 has sold the least. So that's how we can add an order by clause in there. Now, one very, very important thing is if we now want to filter data, if we're doing a group by, we need to be aware of a clause called having. And having is very similar to a where clause. It's just what we use in an aggregated data set. So it might sound complicated. Let me take you through an example. Here, we are calculating this total sales value. So if I had to look at our previous one here, I'm looking at this and I only want to have transactions that are greater than 500. So I could go here and say where total sales value is greater than 500. And if I run this here, it should work, right? It doesn't. The reason for this is that the way SQL runs the statement, this where takes place before this calculation has taken place. So where we're saying here, please pull total sales value greater than 500, this total sales value has not been calculated yet. So where you're using group by with an aggregation, instead of using where on the aggregated field, you have to use having. And that having clause, where you would normally go select from where, that having clause is after your group by. So in other words, SQL goes and it calculates all of this, it gets the total sales value, and then you can say, I want to now filter by whatever I've done in this thing here. Now, like we did in our sorting before, where we could use our order by, we could use the alias. In your having clause, the alias doesn't work. So you actually take, instead of using the alias, you take your actual calculation and you put it here. So if I had to logically talk through this, I'd say I want to see all the employees that have the total quantity times price as total sales value in my sales transaction table. I want to see it by employee where the result of this calculation is greater than 500. And then I want it sorted by total sales value. And if we run that, there we have it. It's sorting it correctly. It is filtering it correctly. So having is another way of filtering, but it's filtering an aggregated value, where is filtering on an unaggregated value. And that's just because the way SQL processes this query, this happens after the where clause happens. So when you have a where, SQL goes, it filters the data by the where and then applies the aggregations. So this always has to be, where you're looking at filtering data by an aggregated value, it has to be part of the having clause, and that has to be after your group by. So that's what having is. Sounds complicated. It works exactly like where. It's just applying the aggregated total to a value and filtering that data set. So there we looked at how to do grouping. We had a look at adding order by, where you can use the alias. And we looked at wanting to filter our result set from an aggregation. There we have to use group by because we have a field with our aggregation, so we have to group by that field. And then we can do our filtering on the result of this calculation by putting the calculation in with our filter and then ordering the result. And then you can see it's ordered. So that sounds like a mouthful, but you're going to use it a lot. You just need to bear in mind that where you can apply to a data set, and having you apply to filtering an aggregated result. So hopefully that makes sense. We're going to touch on it a lot more in the future. So I hope you have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much.